Hello! Today we are going to talk about borrowed chords, what they are, and how to use them. Let's hook into it. Borrowed chords are literally chords borrowed from another key. So to understand how we can use borrowed chords, how we can find them, we first need to know what diatonic chords are. Some of you may already know all about this, so feel free to skip forward a little bit if you want. This won't take long though, so let's quickly figure out what diatonic chords are. Diatonic chords are chords that are built off the notes in a particular scale. So, for example, in a C major scale, all of our diatonic chords are going to use the notes in a C major scale. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Now, the diatonic chords that we get in scales are always consistent in their quality. So whether they're major, minor, diminished, augmented, whatever they are, they stay consistent through different scales of the same quality. So for example, all major scales have the following triads: major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. And they also have the same sevenths. So we get a major 7, minor 7, minor 7, major 7, a dominant 7, minor 7, and then a half diminished 7th, or a minor 7 flat 5. If you want to know a little bit more about major and minor, all of that sort of stuff, I do have a video about that as well. But basically what you need to know is that whatever key we're in, so C major, B flat minor, G Dorian, whatever we're in, diatonic chords use the notes in the scale, in the key, right? So as we said before, in C major, we don't get any notes other than C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Those are our diatonic notes that make our diatonic chords. So if we want to borrow a chord, we're going to find one that's non-diatonic because we're borrowing it from a different key. And if we used ones that were diatonic to this one as well, they wouldn't be borrowed. They'd just be in this key. So we're going to borrow chords that don't belong in this key, in whatever key you're writing in diatonically. We've got a few options for how we find and use borrowed chords, and we're going to start by changing the quality. As usual, let's do our first example in C major. So our diatonic chords are C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, and B diminished. Then you also have the diatonic sevenths here as well. Now, if we wanted to borrow a chord by changing the quality of one of these, we've got the following options for triads. We can do major, minor, diminished, augmented, and basically we're just going to do one that it's not already. So if we were going to change that D minor chord, we wouldn't change it to a minor, would we? Because it's already a minor. So we'd change that to either major, diminished, or augmented. You can also do non-diatonic suspensions, so you might have a sus2 or a sus4 that you can add in that's non-diatonic too. And you can also change the quality of the seventh. You could turn that D minor 7 into a minor 7 flat 5. As long as it's a different quality to whatever we had in our original key, we have got ourselves a borrowed chord. Sitting on the Dock of the Bay by Otis Redding actually uses this sort of borrowed chord technique with a major 2 chord and a major 3 chord rather than the diatonic minors that we would expect. There's a heck of a lot of songs out there that use these changed qualities as passing chords. So a classic thing is getting our major 4 followed by our minor 4. So for example in C, that would be F major, F minor, and back to C. Radiohead's song Creep does that, and we also get that in I Will Follow You Into the Dark by Death Cab for Cutie. I'm sure you're going to recognize that chord progression as well from other songs too. Our next option for borrowing chords is building a chord off a note that's not present in the key at all. So again, we'll stick with C major just for continuity's sake. We could build something off the C sharp or G flat, D sharp or E flat, F sharp or G flat, G sharp or A flat, or A sharp, B flat. The ones that I've seen the most out of these are a flat 3, flat 6, and flat 7. A classic thing to do with these is use them chromatically, so to transition between chords. We might get like a D minor to E flat minor to E minor. Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World actually uses this sort of borrowed chord in the chords D minor to D flat to G minor 7. And to be honest with you, you can actually just whack them in. Like you don't have to be that strategic about using chromaticism in it. You could put a G major 7, a B flat major 7, then D major 7, and it would sound like this, which is lovely as well. You can also borrow chords from specific keys with the same tonic. So some classic ones we get are from the parallel minor or parallel mixolydian mode. So if we're in C major, we would be borrowing from C natural minor or C mixolydian. These would be the different chords. So from looking at those options there, you could do something like change our D minor to a D diminished instead. But those are the options if you're borrowing from the parallel minor or mixolydian mode. You could technically borrow any chord from any other key, but some are going to sound better than others. So that's why it can be helpful if you're new to this sort of thing to start by borrowing from the parallel minor if you're working in major, or from the parallel major if you're working in minor. And when we're talking about parallel keys, we're talking about keys that are built off a different scale but from the same starting note. So the reason why C natural minor and C mixolydian are parallel to major is because they all start on C. C is the home note for all of those keys, even though the notes change within them. The last borrowed chord technique I'm going to talk about is building chord progressions off shared notes. So we can use shared chord tones to create diatonic or non-diatonic progressions. So for example, if we're moving from C to E minor, we have two shared chord tones with the E and the G, and we're just shifting one of the notes. But we can also include borrowed chords. So for example, if we were going from C to a G minor, we're keeping the G consistent and changing the other two notes in the chord. Bo Burnham uses a lot of these borrowed chords with shared chord tones. In his song Comedy, he's got a D minor to a D flat augmented to an F. We can see the shared notes there. And then he also has a C to a C sharp diminished to a B flat with those shared chord tones there. If you want to know a little bit more about the theory behind shared chord tones and horizontal harmony, you can have a look at the video that I did all about horizontal harmony and understanding that too. So I'll put that somewhere here. One of the important things to remember when you're experimenting with borrowed chords is that all the songs that use borrowed chords balance out the non-diatonic borrowed chords with diatonic chords as well. Too much of a good thing can be a bad thing, or in this case, harmonic madness. So if every chord is borrowed, we hit atonal madness, which may be exactly what you're going for. And if so, brilliant. If not, not so brilliant. So just keep an eye out for that and make sure you're balancing out your borrowed chords if that's what you want to do. As we've seen, we've got a few different approaches to finding those borrowed chords. You can go quite logically and choose the key that you're borrowing from, choose which parallel mode or scale that you want to steal from. But you can also go a more oral approach and have a look at it through shared chord tones and that sort of chromatic movement. And in that case, you may not necessarily know exactly what key or scale you're borrowing from, and that's okay. With this sort of music theory stuff, the only time that it's really important to know exactly what you're doing is, well, one, if you want to know, but if you're doing an analysis or you're having to justify your choices, then you need to know exactly what's going on. But honestly, otherwise, as long as you're happy with the chords that you've chosen, it doesn't really matter where they've come from, but it is good to know whether you're using diatonic chords or borrowed chords and how that changes the progression, the song, the mood, and make sure it's working for you. The main thing is that you like it. So if you're happy to do something chromatic or do something with shared chord tones without knowing exactly what key, what scale, wherever you're borrowing these chords from, that is a-okay. Please let me know if you have any questions at all. Hopefully that is nice and clear for you and borrowed chords are a little bit less scary now.